It was a freezing January morning in Cedarville, Ohio, the kind where your breath hangs in the air like a ghost. The parking lot of Harper's Market was nearly empty, save for a few cars dusted with overnight snow. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over aisles of canned soup and day-old bread. At Register 3, Sarah Miller, a 42-year-old clerk with tired eyes and a faded red apron, scanned a pack of gum for a customer who barely looked at her. Nobody ever really looked at Sarah. She was the kind of person you'd pass 100 times and never remember. Her brown hair tied back in a loose bun, her hands moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been on her feet for 12-hour shifts 6 days a week for the last 15 years. But today, something was different. Sarah felt it the moment a young woman, maybe 25, stepped up to her register. The woman's coat was too thin for the weather, her hands trembling as she fumbled with a crumpled $5 bill. Her cart held a single loaf of bread and a small jar of peanut butter. "That's all I can afford today," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, her face soft but unreadable. She'd seen this before, too many times. Cedarville wasn't what it used to be. The textile factory had shut down 3 years ago, leaving half the town scraping by. People came in here every day, counting pennies for milk, skipping meals so their kids wouldn't have to. Sarah rang up the items, $3.82. The woman's eyes dropped to the floor, her fingers clutching the bill like it was her last lifeline. "I think I have some change in my bag," she said, digging frantically. Sarah glanced at the line behind her, only 2 people, but they were watching impatiently. She could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken judgment. "Just pay and go," their eyes seemed to say. Sarah's heart twisted. She knew that look, that feeling of being invisible yet exposed. She'd felt it herself years ago when she was the one counting change to keep the lights on after her husband walked out. "Wait," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "I got this." She reached into her own pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills of her own, and slid them into the register. The woman froze, her eyes wide. "You don't have to," she started, but Sarah waved her off. "It's just a couple bucks. Don't worry about it." The woman's lip trembled, and for a moment it looked like she might cry. Instead, she grabbed her bag and hurried out, muttering a "thank you," so quiet it barely reached Sarah's ears. The next customer, an older man in a worn flannel jacket, stepped forward. "Had seen everything." "That was kind of you," he said, his voice gruff but warm. Sarah shrugged, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Just doing my job," she said, scanning his coffee and eggs. But the man shook his head. "No, that was more than your job. You didn't have to do that." Sarah didn't know how to respond, but she wasn't used to being noticed, let alone praised. She mumbled something about store policy and moved on to the next item. What Sarah didn't know was that the woman she'd helped, Emily Carter, wasn't just another struggling local. Emily was a single mom raising a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, on a part-time waitress salary. That loaf of bread and peanut butter was supposed to last them 3 days. Emily had been one paycheck away from losing her apartment, her pride battered from months of asking for extensions from her landlord. Sarah's small act, $2.18, meant Lily would eat dinner tonight. It meant Emily could breathe just for a moment without the crushing weight of survival pressing down on her. Word spread faster than Sarah could have imagined. By noon, the older man in the flannel jacket, Tom Reynolds, had told his buddies at the diner about the clerk at Harper's who'd paid for a stranger's groceries. One of them, a retired school teacher named Margaret, posted about it on the town's community Facebook page. "A quiet act of kindness in a town that's seen better days," she wrote. "Let's pay it forward." By evening, the post had over 100 likes and a dozen comments. People sharing their own stories of being helped or helping others, of small moments that kept them going when life felt too heavy. Sarah clocked out at 7, her feet aching, her mind already on the frozen dinner waiting at home. She didn't check Facebook. She didn't know that her small gesture had lit a spark in Cedarville. a town desperate for hope. As she walked to her car, the wind biting at her face, a teenage boy approached her in the parking lot. He held out a $10 bill, his hands shaking from the cold. "Someone left this at the diner for you," he said. "Said to tell you to keep being kind." Sarah stared at the bill, confused. "Who?" she asked. But the boy just shrugged and jogged off into the dark. That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the $10 bill smoothed out in front of her. She thought about Emily, about the look in her eyes when she realized you could take the bread home. Sarah didn't know Emily's name or her story, but she knew that look. It was the same one she'd seen in the mirror 15 years ago, when she was alone, broke, and terrified. She pulled herself out of that darkness, one shift at a time, one small choice at a time. Maybe, she thought, that's what kindness does. It pulls people out, even just a little. But this was only the beginning. What Sarah didn't know was that her act had caught the attention of someone else entirely. Someone who'd been watching Cedarville for years, waiting for a moment like this, to unravel a secret buried deep in the town's past. A secret that would change everything. Sarah thought she knew about herself and the people around her. Stick around, because what happens next changes everything. I've walked past people like Sarah every day, never realizing how one moment of courage can change everything. The next morning, Sarah Miller woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was barely 6. The sky outside her small apartment, still a bruised shade of gray. She rubbed her eyes, expecting a text from her manager about an early shift at Harper's Market. Instead, it was a notification from the Cedarville community Facebook page, a message from someone named Clara Evans, a name Sarah vaguely recognized as one of the older regulars at the store. The message was short, almost cryptic. "Sarah, what you did yesterday reminded me of someone I knew long ago. Can we talk? Meet me at the diner on Main at 8. Sarah frowned, her thumb hovering over the screen. She wasn't one for mysterious meetings, and Clara, with her sharp eyes and habit of lingering too long at the register, always seemed to know more than she let on. But something about the message tugged at Sarah's curiosity like a loose thread she could not resist pulling. She typed a quick reply, "Sure, I'll be there," and got ready for her mind replaying the strange encounter with the teenage boy in the parking lot the night before. $10, and a note to keep being kind. It didn't make sense, but Cedarville was small, and small towns had a way of weaving people's lives together in ways you didn't expect. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease, its red vinyl booths worn but welcoming. Clara was already there, sitting in a corner booth, her white hair pulled back in a neat bun. A manila envelope sat on the table in front of her, its edges yellowed with age. Sarah slid into the booth, her apron still tucked in her purse from last night's shift. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice cautious but polite. Clara's eyes softened, but there was a weight to them, like she was carrying something heavy. "Your kindness at the store yesterday, Sarah, stirred up something in this town. People are talking, remembering what it means to look out for each other. But it also reminded me of a story I've kept quiet for 30 years. Clara slid the envelope across the table. "This is about your mother." Sarah's breath caught. Her mother, Ellen Miller, had died when Sarah was 10, killed in a car accident on Route 42 just outside Cedarville. The memory was a wound Sarah rarely touched, her mother's warm laugh, her hands braiding Sarah's hair, gone in an instant. The official report said Ellen's car swerved to avoid a deer and hit a tree. Tragic, but simple. "What about her?" Sarah asked, her fingers brushing the envelope but not opening it. Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "That accident wasn't what it seemed. Your mother wasn't alone on that road. There was another, Clara, black sedan that sped off before the police arrived. I saw it, Sarah. I was driving home from my shift at the old textile factory that night. I never told anyone because I was scared. The man driving that sedan was powerful, someone with enough money to make questions disappear." Sarah's heart pounded, her mind racing to make sense of Claire's words. "Who was he?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Clara hesitated, then opened the envelope and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping. It was an obituary for Ellen Miller, but clipped to it was a handwritten note in tight, careful script. It listed a name, Edward Hargrove, and a date, April 12, 1995, the night of the accident. Hargrove was the CEO of the textile factory back then, Clara said. He owned half of Cedarville. People whispered he'd been drinking that night, but the police never investigated him. They said it was just a tragic accident. I kept this note all these years, waiting for the right moment. Your kindness yesterday, it felt like a sign. Sarah's hand shook as she held the clipping. Edward Hargrove. Shed heard the name growing up, always spoken in hushed tones, like he was a ghost who still haunted the town had left Cedarville years ago, sold the factory, and moved to a mansion in Columbus. But now, Clara's words were ripping open a truth Sarah had never questioned. Her mother's death wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up buried by money and influence. Why tell me now? Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and grief. Clara reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on Sarah's. Because you reminded me that one person can make a difference. You helped that young woman at the store, and now the whole town's talking about kindness again. Maybe it's time we stop hiding from the truth. Maybe it's time for justice. Sarah left the diner with the envelope tucked under her arm, her mind a storm of emotions. She drove past the old factory site, now just a crumbling lot overgrown with weeds, and felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She didn't know what she'd do with Clara's revelation, but she knew she couldn't let it sit. Not anymore. As she pulled into her apartment complex, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the community page, this time from Emily Carter, the woman from the store.
I heard what you did for me, Sarah. I want to help pay it forward. Can we meet?
Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. Emily didn't know about the envelope or Clara's secret, but her timing felt like more than coincidence. Cedarville was waking up, and Sarah was starting to realize she wasn't as invisible as she thought. But what she didn't know was that Clara's note had already reached someone else, someone who'd been watching Sarah from a distance, someone who knew more about Edward Hargrove than they were ready to admit. If stories like this speak to you, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. I've learned that sometimes the truth we avoid is the one that sets us free. The sun hung low over Cedarville, painting the sky in streaks of orange as Sarah Miller sat in her beat-up sedan outside the community center. The manila envelope from Clara rested on the passenger seat, its weight heavier than papers should be. Sarah's mind was still reeling from the diner from the name Edward Hargrove scrawled on that faded note. Her mother's death, a wound she'd carried for 30 years, wasn't just a tragedy, it was a lie. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale, trying to decide her next move. Then her phone buzzed again. Emily Carter's message. I'm at the community center. Can you come by? Sarah took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope, and stepped out into the chilly evening. Inside, the community center hummed with the low chaos of after-school programs. Kids laughing, a basketball thumping against the gym floor. Emily was waiting near the entrance, her thin coat zipped up tight, her daughter Lily clinging to her hand. Lily, 6 years old, with bright eyes and a messy ponytail, clutched a crayon drawing of a flower.
Sarah, you came?
Emily said, her voice soft but urgent.
I heard people talking about what you did at Harper's, paying for my groceries. It meant more than you know.
Sarah shifted uncomfortably, unused to gratitude. It was nothing, she said, but Emily shook her head. No, it was everything.
I want to do something for you, for this town.
Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious but guarded. What do you mean? Emily glanced at Lily, who was busy coloring on a nearby table, then lowered her voice.
I've been thinking about how we all struggle here, but nobody talks about it. Your kindness, it's got people opening up. I want to start something, maybe a food drive to help families like mine, but I can't do it alone.
Sarah hesitated. She wasn't a leader, wasn't someone who organized things. She was just a clerk who scanned groceries. But Emily's eyes held a spark of hope, and Sarah felt that same pull she had felt in the Dinera, thread connecting her to something bigger. Before she could respond, a man approached them, his boots scuffing against the linoleum. He was in his late 50s, with a weathered face and a flannel shirt tucked into worn jeans. Mike Donovan, he said, extending a hand. "I heard you two talking. Mind if I join?" Sarah recognized him. He was a regular at Harper's, always buying the same thing, a loaf of rye and a gallon of milk. Emily nodded, and Mike pulled up a chair. "I saw that Facebook post about what you did, Sarah," he said. "Got me thinking about this town, how we've let it fall apart since the factory closed. I used to work there, back when Hargrove ran it." Sarah's heart skipped at the name Hargrove. She asked, her voice sharper than she meant. Mike's eyes narrowed, like he'd caught something in her tone. "Yeah, Edward Hargrove. He was the big boss before he sold the place and left us all high and dry." "Why do you ask?" Sarah's fingers tightened around the envelope in her lap. She hadn't planned to share Clara's secret, but Mike's mention of Hargrove felt like a door cracking open. She took a breath and slid the newspaper clipping across the table.
"This says Hargrove was involved in my mother's death."
"A car accident 30 years ago."
"It wasn't an accident."
Emily's eyes widened, and Lily looked up from her drawing, sensing the shift in the air. Mike leaned forward, his face hardening as he read the note.
"I knew your mom, Sarah Ellen, was a good woman. Worked at the factory with me. She was always asking questions about safety violations, missing funds. Hargrove didn't like that."
Sarah's chest tightened.
She'd never known her mother worked at the factory. You're saying she was targeted?
Mike nodded slowly.
"I don't have proof, but I saw things back then. Late-night meetings, Hargrove's guys coming and going. Ellen asked too many questions, and then that accident."
Emily reached out her hand, resting on Sarah's arm.
That's awful, Sarah. What are you going to do?
Sarah didn't know. Her whole life she'd accepted her mother's death as a cruel twist of fate. Now the truth was unraveling, and it was bigger than she could handle alone. Mike leaned back, his voice steady but fierce. "I've kept quiet too long. If Hargrove's behind this, it'll help you dig. I know people who worked for him, people who might talk now that he's not around to scare them." Sarah felt a rush of something unfamiliar. Trust. Mike wasn't just a customer. He was someone who'd seen the same shadows she was now chasing. Emily chimed in, her voice stronger now. "And I'll help too, not just with the food drive, but with this. We can ask around, see who else knows about Hargrove. Cedarville's small. Someone's bound to have heard something." Lily piped up, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Mommy, is Sarah a superhero?" Emily smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Maybe she is, sweetie." That night, Sarah drove home with a strange mix of fear and determination. The envelope sat beside her, now joined by a napkin where Mike had scribbled names of old factory workers. Emily had promised to spread the word about the food drive, but Sarah knew this was about more than groceries now. It was about uncovering a truth that had been buried for decades, a truth that could shake Cedarville to its core. As she parked, her phone lit up with a new message, this time from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Sarah. Some secrets are better left alone." Her blood ran cold. Someone was watching. Someone who knew what she was after. What Sarah didn't realize was that Mike Donovan wasn't just a former factory worker, had been closer to Hargrove than had let on, and his offer to help wasn't as selfless as it seemed. The truth about her mother was about to lead Sarah into a web of lies that stretched far beyond one night 30 years ago. If you're moved by stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. I wonder how often I've underestimated someone who was quietly fighting for what's right. The air in Cedarville felt heavier now, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Sarah Miller sat at her kitchen table, the manila envelope open, its contents scattered like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. The anonymous text from last night, "Stop digging, Sarah, some secrets are better left alone," kept replaying in her mind. She hadn't told Emily or Mike about it, not yet. Her fingers traced the edge of her mother's obituary, the words blurring as memories of Ellen flooded back, her mother's voice singing softly while folding laundry, the way she tucked Sarah in with a story about chasing dreams. Those memories had been Sarah's anchor, but now they felt like fragments of a life stolen too soon. She glanced at the napkin Mike had given her with names of former factory workers who might know more about Edward Hargrove. One name stood out. Ruth Bennett,
a woman Sarah vaguely remembered from childhood, always at the edge of town gatherings with a quiet smile and watchful eyes.
Ruth had worked at the textile factory alongside Ellen, and, according to Mike, she'd been one of the last to see her mother alive. Sarah's stomach churned at the thought of confronting her, but the text on her phone was a warning she couldn't ignore. Someone wanted her to stop, and that meant she was close to something real. By noon, Sarah was knocking on Ruth's door, a small house on the edge of Cedarville with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Ruth, now in her late 60s, opened the door, her gray hair tied back, her face etched with years of hard work.
"Sarah," she said, "surprise," softening her voice. "I heard about what you did at Harper's. Come in." The living room smelled of lavender and old books, a stark contrast to the chaos in Sarah's head. She didn't waste time. "Ruth, I need to know about my mom, about the night she died. Clara Evans gave me a note that says Edward Hargrove was involved." Ruth's face paled, her hands trembling as she sank into a worn armchair.
"You're digging into dangerous things, Sarah. I told Ellen the same thing 30 years ago." Sarah leaned forward, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Ruth's eyes darted to the window as if checking for shadows. "Your mom wasn't just a factory worker. She was part of a group, me, her, a few others, who noticed things. Missing paychecks, unsafe machines, money funneled into accounts that didn't exist. Ellen was the brave one. She confronted Hargrove, threatened to go to the state labor board. That's when things got bad." Sarah's breath hitched. "Bad how?" Ruth hesitated, then stood and pulled a small metal box from a bookshelf. She opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed papers, pay stubs, handwritten notes, a ledger page with numbers that didn't add up. "Ellen gave me these before she died," Ruth said. "Told me to keep them safe. She said Hargrove wasn't just cutting corners. She was laundering money through the factory." Sarah's eyes scanned the documents, her mother's neat handwriting marking discrepancies in red ink. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking with frustration. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared." Sarah Hargrove had people everywhere, cops, council members. After Ellen's accident, I got a call, a man's voice saying I'd end up like her if I talked. I had kids to protect. I kept quiet. Sarah wanted to be angry, but she saw the guilt in Ruth's face, the weight of 30 years of silence. "Did you see the car that night?" "The black sedan." Ruth nodded slowly. "It was Hargrove's. I was driving behind Ellen, saw it speed past her, force her off the road. I stopped, but she was already gone." Sarah's world tilted. Her mother hadn't just died. She'd been murdered. The room felt too small, the air too thick. "I need to take these papers, Ruth. I need to make this right." Ruth grabbed her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Be careful. Sarah Hargrove's gone, but his son, James, still lives in Columbus. He's just as ruthless. Runs a real estate empire now. If you go after him, you're not just fighting a ghost." That evening, Sarah met Emily at the community center where the food drive was taking shape. Tables were lined with donated cans and cereal boxes, a small crowd buzzing with purpose. Emily's daughter Lily ran up holding a flyer shed drawn for the drive.
"Look, Sarah, it's for you."
The flyer had a cartoon heart and the words, "Kindness counts." Sarah smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. She pulled Emily aside and showed her the ledger page from Ruth.
"This is about my mom,"
she said.
"Hargrove killed her to cover up his crimes."
Emily's eyes widened.
"What are you going to do?"
Sarah didn't know yet, but she felt a fire she hadn't known since she was a kid, dreaming of making her mother proud. As they packed up donations, Mike Donovan arrived, his face tense. "I heard you went to Ruth's," he said. "You're moving fast, Sarah."
"Too fast."
His tone was off, not warm like before. Sarah's instincts prickled.
"You knew about my mom, didn't you?"
she asked. Mike looked away, his jaw tight.
I worked security for Hargrove back then, saw things I shouldn't have. I didn't know about Ellen until it was too late. Sarah's heart sank. Mike wasn't just an ally, he'd been part of Hargrove's world, and now she wasn't sure if he was helping her or watching her. As Sarah drove home, her phone buzzed again, another anonymous text. "You're just like your mother. Stop now, or you'll end up the same." The threat was clear, but so was Sarah's resolve. She wasn't alone anymore. Emily, Lily, even Ruth were with her. But Mike's confession had cracked open a new layer of doubt. Was he warning her to protect her or to protect someone else? If you're gripped by stories of courage in the face of secrets, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. I've felt the weight of holding on to pain, but letting go can be the hardest choice of all. The Cedarville library was quiet, its fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the rows of dusty books. Sarah Miller sat at a corner table, the ledger page from Ruth spread out beside a stack of old newspaper articles pulled from the archives. Her mother's handwriting stared back at her, each ready to note a silent accusation against Edward Hargrove. The anonymous texts had kept coming, 3 in the last 2 days, each more threatening than the last.
"You're digging your own grave, Sarah."
She hadn't told Emily or Ruth about them, not wanting to pull them deeper into whatever this was. But the weight of Mike Donovan's confession still gnawed at her. Head work for Hargrove, seen things, and now his guarded looks made her question every word he said. Outside, the February wind howled, rattling the library's windows. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Food drive's going strong. People are asking about you. You okay?" Sarah typed a quick reply. "I'm fine, just researching." But she wasn't fine. Her mother's death, once a closed chapter, was now an open wound, and every clue pointed to a truth that felt too big for one person to carry. The articles mentioned Hargrove's factory deals, his sudden departure from Cedarville, and whispers of lawsuits that never went anywhere. One name kept popping up. James Hargrove, his son, now a real estate tycoon in Columbus, just 60 miles away. Sarah's eyes landed on a faded photo of the factory's ribbon-cutting ceremony in 1985. Her mother, Ellen, stood in the background, young and smiling next to a man in a suit. The caption didn't name him, but Sarah's gut told her it was Hargrove. She was about to dig deeper when the library door creaked open. Mike Donovan stepped in, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. "Found anything?" he asked, his voice low, almost too casual. Sarah slid the ledger under a notebook, her pulse quickening. "Just old articles," she said, keeping her tone even. "What are you doing here, Mike?" He pulled up a chair, his eyes scanning the table. "Heard you were digging into Hargrove. Thought you might need help." Sarah studied him, searching for the truth behind his words. His offer to help had felt genuine at the community center, but his admission about working security for Hargrove changed everything. "Why didn't you tell me you were his security guy from the start?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. Mike's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked like he might bolt. "I didn't want to scare you off," he said finally. "I was young. Sarah Hargrove paid well, and I needed the money. I didn't know what he was doing to Ellen until it was too late." Sarah wanted to believe him, but doubt clung to her like damp, cold fat. "Then why help me now? What's in it for you?" Mike leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I owe her. Ellen was kind to me when I was just a kid starting at the factory. She didn't deserve what happened. I've carried that guilt for 30 years. Sarah's heart softened, but only slightly. Guilt could be real, or it could be a mask. She needed more than words. Before she could press him, the library's side door opened, and Emily rushed in. Her face flushed from the cold.
"Sarah, you need to see this,"
she said, holding out her phone. It was a photo from the food drive posted on the community page. The flyer Lily had drawn was pinned to a donation table, but behind it, a man in a dark coat stood watching the crowd. His face was half hidden, but Sarah recognized him instantly.
James Hargrove, from a recent article about his real estate empire. He was in Cedarville today. "He's here," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. Mike's eyes widened, but he didn't look surprised. "You know him?" Sarah asked, her suspicion flaring. Mike hesitated, then nodded. "Saw him a few times back in the day. He's not like his father, sharper, more careful. If he's here, he knows you're asking questions." Emily grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to go to the police, Sarah. This is getting dangerous." But Sarah shook her head. "The police didn't help my mom 30 years ago. I'm not sure they'll help now." That's when Mike stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I know someone who can help," he said. That's a retired detective, Tom Carver. He worked the factory case back then, didn't buy the accident story. He's in Columbus now, but held talk. If I ask, Sarah's instincts screamed caution, but she was running out of options. The text James Hargrove's sudden appearance, the ledger, it was all closing in. "Okay," she said, "set it up. But Mike, if you're playing me, I'll find out." The meeting was set for the next day in Columbus. Sarah drove with Emily, Lily asleep in the back seat, the ledger tucked safely in her bag. The city's skyline loomed as they approached Carver's small office, a cramped space above a coffee shop. Carver, a wiry man in his 70s with sharp blue eyes, listened as Sarah laid out everything: Clara's note, Ruth's papers, Mike's confession. He nodded slowly, then pulled a file from a locked drawer. "Your mom was onto something big," he said. "Hargrove was laundering money through the factory, and Ellen had proof. I tried to build a case, but evidence kept disappearing. Then she died, and the case was buried with her." Sarah's throat tightened. "Did you know about the black sedan?" Carver's face darkened. "I suspected Hargrove, but I couldn't prove it. His son James was just a kid then, but he's taken over the family business, legal and otherwise. If he's in Cedarville, he's tying up loose ends." Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text. "Last warning, drop it or your friends pay." She showed it to Carver, who didn't flinch. "That's James's style," he said. "He doesn't get his hands dirty, but he's got people who do." As they left, Sarah's mind raced. Mike had set up this meeting, but his past with Hargrove made him a wild card. Was he leading her to answers or into a trap? Emily, sensing her fear, squeezed her hand. "We're in this together, Sarah. You're not alone." But as they stepped into the street, Sarah saw a black SUV idling across the road, its windows tinted. Her heart stopped. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was real, and it was here. If you're caught up in Sarah's fight for truth, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. I've seen how 1 second of bravery can rewrite someone's entire story. The black SUV lingered across the street from the Columbus coffee shop, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Sarah Miller's heart thudded as she gripped Emily's hand, the retired detective Tom Carver's words still echoing in her mind. James Hargrove wasn't just tying up loose ends. She was a predator circling closer with every step Sarah took toward the truth about her mother's death. The ledger, the threatening texts, Mike Donovan's murky past, it all pointed to a conspiracy that had festered in Cedarville for decades. Emily glanced at the SUV, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We need to move. Sarah, now." Sarah nodded, guiding Lily, who clutched her crayon-drawn flyer toward their car. The weight of her mother's ledger in her bag felt like a ticking bomb. Back in Cedarville, the community center was alive with the food drive's momentum. Volunteers sorted donations cans of soup, boxes of pasta, bags of rice, while kids ran through the gym, their laughter a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Sarah's head. She hadn't told Emily about the latest text, the one that came as they left Carver's office. "You can't protect everyone." It wasn't just about her anymore. Emily, Lily, Ruth, even Mike, they were all at risk because of her questions. Sarah sat at a folding table watching Lily color a new flyer, her small hands steady despite the chaos Sarah felt inside. Emily leaned over, her voice low. "Did Carver give you anything we can use?" Sarah hesitated, then slid the ledger across the table. "He confirmed it. My mom had evidence Hargrove was laundering money. His son's covering it up now." Emily's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Mike Donovan walked in, his face tense, had been distant since the library, his answers vague when Sarah pressed him about Hargrove.
I talked to some old factory guys, he said, sitting down. They're scared, but a few might talk, if we can guarantee protection. Sarah studied him, her trust fraying. Why are they scared, Mike? What aren't you telling me? His eyes darted to the floor. I told you I was security for Hargrove. I saw things, deals, payoffs I didn't know about. Ellen's death until after, but I knew enough to keep quiet. Sarah's stomach twisted. You're still holding back. If you're with us, prove it. Mike pulled a small USB drive from his pocket and set it on the table. This has emails from Hargrove's office from '95. I kept them as insurance. They mention your mom, payments to local cops, and a cleanup after an accident. Sarah's breath caught. Why now? Why give this to me now? Mike's voice cracked. Because I see you fighting for Ellen, and it's like she's here again, calling me out for staying silent. I can't undo the past, but I can help you now. Sarah didn't know if she could trust him, but the USB drive was a lifeline. She took it to the library that evening, using a public computer to open the files. The emails were a gold mine, dates, names, dollar amounts, and one chilling message. From Hargrove to an unknown contact, Ellen Miller's, getting too close. Handle it. Sarah's hands shook as she saved the files to a cloud drive and sent a copy to Carver. She was about to leave when the library door opened and a man in a dark coat stepped in. James Hargrove. His polished shoes clicked against the floor, his smile cold. You're persistent, Sarah, he said, his voice smooth but menacing. Just like your mother. My father warned her too. It didn't end well. Sarah stood, her heart racing, but her voice steady. I'm not her, James, and you're not as untouchable as you think. Hargrove's smile faded. You've got nothing but old papers and guesses. Walk away, or your friends like that little girl and her mom will pay the price. Sarah's blood ran cold, but she thought of Lily's flyer, of Emily's courage, of her mother's fight. You're wrong, she said. I've got proof, and it's already with someone you can't scare. Hargrove's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the library's security alarm blared. Emily had tripped it from outside, a plan they'd made in case things went south. Police arrived within minutes, but Hargrove was gone, slipping out a back exit. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Carver. Got your files. FBI's involved now. Stay safe. The next morning, Cedarville buzzed with news. The food drive had grown, with donations pouring in from neighboring towns, inspired by Sarah's story, which had spread online. But more shocking was the breaking news. James Hargrove had been arrested in Columbus, charged with money laundering and conspiracy tied to his father's crimes. The emails from Mike's USB, combined with Carver's old case files, had been enough to crack the case wide open. Sarah stood in the community center watching volunteers pack food boxes. She said, Emily approached Lily trailing behind with a new drawing, a heart with Sarah's name inside. You did it, Sarah, Emily said. You made this town believe in itself again. Sarah shook her head. We did it. You, Lily, Ruth, even Mike. This was all of us. But deep down, she felt her mother's presence guiding her through every step. If you're inspired by stories of ordinary people fighting for justice, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. I realize now that even the smallest actions can create waves we'll never fully see.